we had a top 3 player in the league at this time, power forward, that I was trying to get to come to Indy. He wanted to come. I bring it to the front office. They ain't do. They deaded it.
Did you ever say who that was?
It was AD.
Okay.
AD. Me and AD talked. And AD wanted to come to Indy, close to Chicago. He was like, man, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Y'all got something going over there.
So imagine that.
You will not believe how many blockbuster trades almost went through that we never knew about. Yes, it's true. There have been so many different scenarios in the past that would have sent legendary NBA players to different teams, shaking up the league as we know it and changing history. Obviously, those trades never happened, but I think it's fascinating to think about what could have been had they gone through. Let's start with one trade that would have completely altered the future of the league. Not many people know about this, but back in 2007, the entire NBA was almost thrown for a loop. Yes, you heard that correctly. That year was the year after Shaquille O'Neal left the Los Angeles Lakers, and happened to be when Kobe Bryant was doing all that he could in order to fulfill the void that he left behind. The Lakers were desperate to add talent for Kobe and try to win another championship. They searched the league for talent that they thought would be a nice fit, and decided to inquire about the Cleveland Cavaliers star, LeBron James. The Lakers would have had to throw in their entire roster to make this trade happen, but each side had some negotiations on the topic, but never got that close. Kobe ended up winning championships with Los Angeles, while LeBron moved on to win one in Cleveland and in Miami with the Heat. You don't see NBA legends getting traded all that often now, do you? The next trade that almost happened involves Kobe Bryant once again. This also happened to be the exact same year that the Lakers attempted to bring in LeBron from Cleveland. Although these trade talks got quite a bit further than the LeBron to Los Angeles talks, as the Chicago Bulls were inches away from cementing a deal that would send the star Lakers guard to Chicago in exchange for Joakim Noah and Luol Deng. Kobe was able to read between the lines on the deal though, understanding that if the deal were to happen, he would be left with a depleted roster. Chicago didn't have many assets to offer besides those two, and trading them away would place Bryant on a rebuilding team, and he did not want that. Instead, he stayed with the Lakers and won a few championships, while the Bulls held on to those players and drafted Derrick Rose. I guess you could say it was a win-win for either of those teams. This next move would have completely changed the landscape of the NBA. As hard as it will be to believe, the Chicago Bulls were nearing a trade that would have sent arguably the greatest basketball player of all time in Michael Jordan over to the Los Angeles Clippers. Back in 1987, the Clippers had offered the Bulls a whopping 5 players and any number of draft picks that the Bulls wanted in order to sweeten the pot for Jordan. Their owner at the time, Jerry Reinsdorf, didn't read too much into the offer, but their general manager can't say the same. Jerry Krause had given a lot of thought over the idea and was willing to listen to anything the Clippers could throw at them. Thankfully, the Bulls opted to avoid what would have been one of the worst trades in NBA history and went on to win 6 more championships. You all know how Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of all time, and could even go down as the best Golden State Warriors player ever. Well, he was almost flipped over to the Phoenix Suns back in 2009. At the time, Steve Kerr stepped down from his general manager position and became the head coach for the Suns, trying to do everything in his power to bring Curry over to Phoenix. The team even offered the former NBA champion Amari Stoudemire to see if the Warriors were interested in giving away arguably the greatest shooter of all time. Golden State luckily declined their offer, and Kerr ended up becoming so enthralled with Curry's talents that he joined the Warriors to become their head coach, and the rest is now history, with the team winning multiple championships and dominating the league at one point. While we will never get to see Curry on a different team, it would have been interesting to place him on Phoenix. Just think of all the free agents that would have signed there just for him. Another trade that would have been fascinating to see was a flip between Scottie Pippen and Shawn Kemp. As many of you might have known if you watched the Chicago Bulls documentary The Last Dance, there was a point in time which saw Pippen want to leave the team and allowed Jerry Krause to search for possible trade destinations for the disgruntled forward. There were reports that the Bulls were only interested in acquiring Kemp from the Seattle Supersonics in any type of deal involving Pippen. After a few weeks of heated discussions, both sides decided to hold on to their star players, with Pippen winning 3 more championships with Chicago. It would have been really different if the Bulls trio was Jordan, Kemp, and Dennis Rodman. Maybe those 3 win less championships, and maybe the Supersonics win one with Pippen leading the charge. Shockingly enough, this next trade featured yet another member of the Chicago Bulls in Dennis Rodman, although he wasn't on the Bulls just yet. While Rodman was on the Detroit Pistons during the Bad Boy Pistons days, the team was thinking about shipping him away during the 1993 NBA season. The best offer that they had gotten was to flip him to the Phoenix Suns in exchange for Richard Dumas. In fact, each side was all prepared to make that deal a reality until a report broke out that stated that Dumas had a serious substance abuse problem off the court, which made Rodman somehow look like the responsible one. If Rodman were to be flipped over to the Suns, he would have partnered up with one of the best to ever do it in Charles Barkley, a duo that definitely could have won a title while picking up controversy, I'm sure. On the other hand, Dumas could have helped improve the Pistons, but because of his abuse issue, he wouldn't have been that great there. Charles Barkley found himself in more trade rumors back in 1991, exactly 1 year before he left the Philadelphia 76ers and joined the Phoenix Suns. Scouts and general managers around the entire league believed and still believe that Barkley deserved to be in a winning situation and have a championship-level roster that he wouldn't have to carry to victory each and every game. The Los Angeles Lakers knew his talent level, and despite his off-the-court problems, they still reached out to attempt to pick up the star forward. Los Angeles offered James Worthy, and the two sides spoke a little longer on the topic, but it eventually just collapsed at one point. If the trade were to have gone through, we could have seen a combination of Magic Johnson and Charles Barkley on the Lakers, a team that very well could have defeated the Chicago Bulls trio of Jordan, Pippen, and Rodman. It definitely would have made for a fantastic NBA Finals matchup, and it's disappointing that we were never able to see how it would have played out. It truly seems as if every big trade involves the Los Angeles Lakers or Chicago Bulls, but here we are once again. Chris Paul had spent 6 years with New Orleans and was nearing the open market back in 2011. The Clippers obviously were the team that nabbed him, but the Lakers were going to do everything in their power to avoid that even happening. After a few days of negotiations between the two sides, the Lakers were prepared to offer Kevin Martin, Lamar Odom, Goran Dragic, and Luis Scola to New Orleans, with Pau Gasol heading to the Houston Rockets in a multi-team trade. Had the Lakers picked up Paul in this trade, it most likely would have helped them to avoid falling into the pit of the Western Conference in the years following the failure of this trade. It also would have been cool to see what Paul could have done in a Lakers uniform. However, we wouldn't have gotten the privilege of seeing Lob City in action with Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan with the Clippers otherwise. The Houston Rockets almost changed their entire franchise's history after going into negotiations to trade away their superstar center Hakeem Olajuwon. Olajuwon was the first overall pick in the 1984 NBA draft and was excellent all over the court, both offensively and defensively. After building tons of success in the next few years, Olajuwon was asking for a nice big contract or even a change of scenery. Shortly after those comments, the team had looked into trade possibilities for the star 7-footer. The trade that came the closest to becoming a reality was a deal that would have sent Glenn Rice or Steve Smith to Houston in exchange for Hakeem, sending him over to the Miami Heat. But before either side finalized the deal, they decided to back away and continue as they normally were. It's incredibly hard to picture Hakeem in anything other than a Rockets jersey, and a flip to Miami could have altered the amount of success that he had with Houston the years afterwards. The Rockets also would have taken a ginormous step backwards with either Smith or Rice, as neither of them were franchise-altering players that could take them to an NBA championship. Finally, we come to the deal that featured both the Detroit Pistons and the New York Knicks. The year was 1993, and the Pistons' star point guard Isaiah Thomas was nearing the end of his career, struggling to produce the same stats that he was earlier in his career because of the all-out approach to the game that he played with. Even though he was clearly declining, the Knicks still reached out to Detroit to gauge their interest in a potential trade that would have sent Thomas to New York in exchange for a player that was never named. The two sides talked for a brief period, but each of them understood that Thomas was nowhere near the player that he once was, and was past his all-star and championship seasons. It would have been strange to see Thomas with the Knicks, and even weirder to think about how far that Knicks team could have gone, if anywhere. The same goes for the player that could have been flipped to the Pistons. Could they have kept competing, or would they have only gotten worse and begun a rebuild? Just like all of these other open-ended trades, I guess we will never know what could have been. Thank you everybody so much for watching, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Also, remember to tune into our next video so you don't miss out on more amazing content.